Thank you, Dobre Dan. I'm actually just coming from Montenegro, so I will also make some linkages with that. But perhaps to start with, you give the idea of external evaluation a new meaning. We have every 8 years a group of professionals, professors, academics, practitioners, the industry visiting us, and I think it's a very interesting concept that you take a tour bus as students and you look at different universities. And I'm neither using Facebook nor Twitter, but I would write down here now what actually you are going to take home from your trip as you around in Europe collecting impressions on this wayfinding. I think it's a very interesting concept of looking around in such a big group. So we heard earlier from Marco. Also thanks for inviting. Thanks to Damien, Haris, Chelko, and my colleagues here for being around here along with you. That there's a brain drain, but don't worry too much about the brain drain. I tell you, Alfredo and I, we've worked for quite some years in South America, in Caracas, in Venezuela, and I would say there's also advantages to that. You'll find your friends and your colleagues in different countries, in different institutions around the world. It doesn't make you weaker, but you should not forget also to stay connected and work with the knowledge that you have from the Balkans, which I think is a quite interesting one. And I like to start with welcoming you as the Yugo architects, because we are interested in the South, and I think the global South is not anymore an exceptional place. It's the rule. Switzerland in that way is an exceptional place, exceptional in many ways, in good ways, but also in not so good ways. And I think the survival strategies that you learn in the Balkans, with the turbo architecture that Haris here explained me and told me about, and all the sort of activities that are going on in the ex-Yugoslavian states reminded me a lot to what I have grown quite fond and used to in South America. So I would say the wake-up call is not for you, the wake-up call is for the rest of the world. But I was actually in Kotor only a few days ago. You were probably on the road somewhere in Graz or Vienna. When I was on the boat arriving in Kotor, obviously I was not on that boat. Where is it? I was not on that boat. I was in this little rowing boat in front, But I think there's also a lot of space for getting involved in your own country. The minister that I had the pleasure to meet, Minister, I had to write down his name again to give you a clear reference, Minister Vodstenovic, you know him, Vodstenovic, yeah, from Podgorica. Minister Vodstenovic is the Minister for Sustainable Development and Tourism. I would say, and I said this to him as well, this seems to be like a contradiction in terms, because sustainable development and tourism is certainly something that has shown in an economy. Who have you from Montenegro? How many of you? Okay, quite a critical mass, I would say. So, he was very pleased to tell the entire auditorium there that Montenegro has the 5th fastest growing tourism economy, not tourism industry, tourism economy, because there's a slight difference between the two that cost us about an hour to find that out and lay out what the differences are. But we're living in a post-industrial time, and the tourism industry, as you find it at the moment, with its hunger for land, its hunger for resources, and I would say the Kotor Bay is one of those resources, and you see developments like this going on, run by the son of the mayor, etc. I would say certainly a few questions that you have to deal with in your own country, and this is a sort of a slow zoom in, zoom out if you want. So these are the latest developments that are taking shape in the Kotor Bay. And I would say, as much as you might be interested in the higher end of what's going on in architecture, I would say 90% of what is built in Yugoslavia is probably built by non-architects or construction companies, of whatever sort. And I think as architects, we should also be reminded, we should remind ourselves, this is in the forefront, by the way, is the Fjord Hotel, abandoned since 1984, formerly run by the Yugoslav State Tourism Agency. You have to help me, whatever the name of that was, but it's now abandoned. And I would say to end with this little excursion into your backyard, the good thing is that the beach, at this moment it was empty, but the beach in front of the hotel has been squatted. It has been occupied by the people from Kotor, and you know, tourism developments and the big money that you find in tourism usually leads to two things. One of them is gated communities, and the other one is actually, I would say also in a country like, or in the countries of ex-Yugoslavia, the possibility of the creation of something that we like to work in, because we are very interested in it, Alfredo and I, which are squats and slums. And I just jumped directly from Kotor into Caracas, into a project that actually we have developed here at the ETH, which is a study on the tallest, as we think. We're always interested to learn that we have been wrong. So if you know any tallest squat in the world, please, maybe you want to tweet it for me. But this is the so far tallest squat that we have found. It's a close to 200-meter skyscraper with 750 families living inside there, roughly 3,000 people. And this also leads us to something that is interesting for us at the Chair of Architecture and Urban Design. We are interested, obviously, to know where the mainstream goes and where research and publications, etc., where we stand. But I believe strongly that the most interesting inspirations beyond the phenomenology that is discussed so broadly, right? The phenomenology that almost every other presentation starts with a fact that is known to all of you, that we now have become an urban society. But beyond this phenomenology, that we actually have to work with the facts. And I think you're probably well prepared from the background that you have to combine your personal experiences along with what you might learn in your architecture schools in the different states that followed ex-Yugoslavia, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Slovenia, etc., Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, but also I would say, as much as you should know about the other, I think you have actually incredible inspiring realities in front of your backyard, and you might find in these your edge in how to deal with the world. Something that you can only find out by yourself, obviously. But we like to say, you know, the famous line, architecture is frozen music, but to connect with Marco, urbanism is frozen politics, and I think you have quite a bit of that in ex-Yugoslavia. So in that sense, perhaps, because you know, many people ask that along with this building, and it does have something to do also with the Fjord Hotel, because it is an empty structure since '84, quite a long time for a place that is actually eating in the surrounding pristine landscape, a very, I would say, unique landscape. And this is probably what makes Montenegro and the Kotor Bay at this moment so attractive, you know, for Russian real estate investors. I would rather say it is a warning signal to be the fifth fastest growing tourism industry, and architects should also participate like they have done. A lot of your colleagues have been there, both students and faculty from different universities, to discuss what is actually happening in this overheated moment of the country. You know, there's money coming in, desperately needed money probably, but there's also potentially value destroyed. And I think this is also something that architects, urbanists should be interested in. And this is also why I show you a few newspaper articles, actually newspaper articles not from Venezuela, where the whole debate about the tower went up to the president of the country. I think architects and the way, the intelligence to play the media is also something interesting. Just like you heard of earlier from Laurent, books, studies, theory, history, you get a little bit more of it probably later from Akos. All those topics are projects in itself. I would say this whole debate, something that also is interesting for us here in the school, and certainly you're involved in it yourself. An architecture project is not only the build project. You know, it is almost like, you know, it is something that every young architect obviously aspires to, but it is, you know, it is like having your first girlfriend. Once you have it, then you can only repeat it. It's, you know, you will never forget the first one. And I think once you have built a project, suddenly also making a book is an equally important project. Or, you know, maybe some of you will end up in architectural photography or journalism. I think those are equally important projects in the profession of architecture. And therefore I would say also in our faculty, yes, we have in particular the design, in the group of the design professors practicing architects, and this is good so, but we need also the theory, and we need the philosophy. You know, there was a question there earlier. We have sociologists in our department. We need them too, because only if we cover a broader environment, a broader idea of what architecture can do, what architecture actually is in our society, we can also learn to work with it. And certainly in the case of this tower, which is a found project, it is nothing that we have done. We have some ideas that are actually on display at the moment in Berlin in an exhibition which is called Beyond Torre David in the Aedes Gallery. Are you going to Berlin as well, by any chance? Not on your tour? I think you might find yourself quite at home there. Maybe this is why you're not going there. But I think it's a very interesting place. There's an exhibition right now. And as I said earlier, books in themselves, I think, are equally interesting projects. This is something, an experience that you will probably have sooner or later. It's not enough to build. It's also not enough to have somebody do a monography on you. But eventually you will have to formulate and bring your thoughts also in a book format. And equally to that, you know, I told you earlier the Yugo architects, the architects of the South. This is where I have been for the last 15 years. For the last 2.5, 3 years, I'm now here in Zurich, mainly as a base, certainly. But Alfredo and I, we are very heavily involved in work in South America as well. And I think from our perspective, that has been something that we have also learned to embrace more and more, in particular by not being there constantly. You know, this is a very interesting privilege to be in different places at the same time. It sounds like it's hard to do, which perhaps it is, but it's a privilege if you let yourself go and you see also the advantages. But perhaps along with research and teaching, you know, this was actually, I would say, a combined, basically a research project, but we also used it in some teaching modules, and this is what we do. We try also to find new structures of collaborations. Perhaps this is something that could be interesting for you. Outside collaborations, outside of the university, where do we find interfaces with the real world, with practitioners, also experts. And experts can also be people who live at a place and know it. This path has also led us into making films, urban films, if you want. So a project that is actually many years old, but it has gotten also a very new format here at the ETH, because we certainly, and that's one of the very good things, we certainly have an excellent infrastructure at hand. And I want to show you just a trailer of a film we're working on. All the material has been genuinely taken by our team of cameramen and audio guys, besides a short scene from a newsreel from the Chinese television. So I'll leave you with that for a short moment.
Growth is happening in the megacities of the third world.
Density of urban life creates even more social and logistical challenges.
Yo a mí como agricultor público, en el sentido de que eso estuviera pendiente. Un niño que vive en un sitio en cualquier momento se muere.
夏に暑い日差しがあるときには北側に住み、そして、夕方涼しくなってくると南側に出てくる。
What can we do to not only improve life there now, but also possibility to grow these areas into legitimate suburbs of the city or cities in their own right?
This is mind-boggling transformation in the city, and I think this is probably one of the greatest urban design opportunities in the world waiting for happening.
Delhi, Calcutta, maybe a few other places. Short scene of Zurich was actually also inside. But the point here is that you remember perhaps the famous line from Buckminster Fuller, the challenge for young architects would actually be to make 100% of our resources available to 100% of the people living in cities. And this was said at the early 60s. I would say the fact, and here comes the jump from phenomenon into synthesizing, the fact that now more people live in cities makes this, I would say, this invitation or this imperative to make those resources available even more important. I think there's still a big task ahead of us. I say us because you certainly will have to ask yourself the question as well if this is something you're interested in. But as you well know, this billion of slum dwellers is also a billion of people living in cities. You know, poverty has practically urbanized in the last 30 to 40 years. It has become an urban problem. And if you think that China and India have become hot markets because they are huge populations. However, any ideas here? What is the percentage of Indians living today in cities? Any idea? You? How much is the percentage in India? Sorry? 70. No, it's much less. It's roughly 28–30%. You know, Indians still live in the countryside. That actually means that in India and China in the next couple of years you have to build about, you know, you see it in the newspapers, about 20 new Mumbais or Calcuttas. So I think there are enormous tasks ahead of us, and I think this is the sort of architecture that we really have to deliver answers. You know, and those answers you probably don't find in El Croquis magazine. I think this is something that you perhaps find in the suburbs of Belgrade or Pristina or elsewhere, where people sort of have to answer to real-world challenges, and along with necessary research, because there is not enough research. You know, you saw Toyo Ito, you saw Raul Meotra, you saw a couple of people here talking about these issues, but there's not enough basic research done, and I think this is an excellent place to do this here, the university, or your university, because I think in particular many of the cities in ex-Yugoslavia at a different scale, but nevertheless with a similar set of challenges, have actually excellent places to respond to that, or to identify laboratories, you know, areas of experimentation, which we have found in South America are excellent, because, you know, if we talk about norms, rules and regulations that are maybe not so well structured at the moment, something that you find in comparison with Western Europe or North America a lack, it gives you also an enormous liberty. And I would say that, that many of you as architects, you share a question with other people, with politicians, with people who are in the industry, of how do we actually enter those gigantic new markets. Let's not forget, demographically and economically, the cities, and not only the mega cities, also emerging middle-sized cities, these are the places where demographic and economic growth is going on. 90% of population growth will go on only there, right? When we're growing old here, we have to import new people, young people, etc. into Europe. But I would say we have to become much smarter to get a picture of all the information that we have and translate it into our profession. Only then you will be also able to mine in your personal richness of what you can contribute to that. And I'm convinced that the cities in the countries of ex-Yugoslavia have a lot of answers to give. With that, I think I'll stop. Thank you.